In the Brazilian town of São José dos Campos, the local prison has no guards or police. The practical aspects of day-to-day discipline and all security, including family visiting, are in the hands of the inmates themselves. The rate of reoffence, when their sentences are completed, is under 4%. Here, men are not called prisoners. They are known as recuperandos, men who are recovering. 2 of them have filmed the story which follows. APAC stands for the Association for the Care and Protection of the Convicted. They say they kill the criminal and save the man. In 1972, the prison was beyond control, crammed, degraded, and chaos. The government's plans to close it collapsed. There was nowhere for the men to go. For lack of any alternative, they gave control of half the cells to a group of Christian volunteers who'd been visiting some of the men. Their approach to the inmates' problems has transformed the prison's culture. The volunteers and the men are preparing to welcome the families for Sunday visiting. Nine years ago, the man behind the desk was sentenced to 114 years. This is now commuted to 30. After serving 7 years in the closed section of the prison, he is now in overall charge of security for both the closed and open sections. With the sanction of psychologists and the judge in charge of his case, he is free to work for APAC outside the prison during the day. Love is seen to be man's most basic need, and the families are of vital importance in a man's recuperation. To begin with, APAC worked beside the police. After 10 years, it was given complete control. And the inevitable tension between guards and men was removed by giving responsibility for a single key to a mature recuperando. They say to rebuild a man's image of society and of God, you must first rebuild his image of himself. The fundamental importance of the quality of relationships at every stage of life is at the heart of the system. APAC is celebrating its 22nd birthday.
Isso não terminar de repente, porque Deus está atento a tudo isso. Você vê, você põe lá João.
The governor is Mario Ottoboni.
Natanael, tá lá. Ninguém trai nada. Ele põe cada cara na portaria.
He was a lawyer on the city council when the previous regime in the prison collapsed.
Cada cara na portaria, que tem tudo. Porque ela não teve forças para dizer, coragem para dizer que o filho dela estava preso.
He was also a football fanatic. He went bankrupt building a stadium for his local team. Prison followed, and a short time in solitary confinement terrified him. After his release, Ottoboni says his life was transformed through Cursillo, a lay Christian movement begun in Spain by men who had suffered in the Spanish Civil War. He says Cursillo's 3-day introductory course of talks and meditations leads an attender to experience Christ. It brought Ottoboni to believe he must devote his life to prisoners. Cursillo's introductory course is held once every 6 months for new recuperandos and is the basis of the men's development. Ottoboni says the security of a prison is in the hearts and minds of the men. Here they are the security, and they support each other. Hugo Veronese is a distinguished professor of psychology. He has developed APAC's program since it began. The only requirement for a place is commitment to change, both from the men and from their families. Veronese maintains 90% of criminal behavior has its roots in family problems. But the families are the major source of healing, and nothing is incurable. The third man who has staked his reputation and his life on APAC is Silvio Marques Neto, the judge who gave Ottoboni the keys. In 1974, their book, Christ Wept in Jail, shocked the Brazilian prison establishment. Though his reputation is for severe sentencing, he says, for Lazarus to come out of the tomb, everyone must help to roll the stone away. Then Christ will do the rest. APAC has survived ridicule, political attack, and threats of closure. But the system is now working beside the police in wings of 130 other Brazilian prisons, and wide international interest assures the future.
Começamos a pegar do próprio preso o problema, através de sessões de terapia, onde os problemas.
At the beginning, our process was lacking in clear direction, until we stumbled on the realization that the prisoners were the real and only source to achieve the solution for their problems. During therapy sessions, when problems were exposed by the men, we restated the problems to them, and they would come up with the solutions themselves.
Men must apply from other prisons. On arrival, they are warmly welcomed by the most senior prisoners. They may be sick and abused, with armed guards and handcuffs. These are removed, and they're told that here they will never be used again. Everyone has a fresh start. The nature of the crime and the length of the sentence is immaterial. During their first 60 days, they're based in a special cell and have physical and psychological assessments by APAC's professional volunteers. The only difference Ottoboni recognizes is their size and the color of their eyes and their hair. Here, they're given time to adapt to APAC's unexpected philosophy. Next door is the old punishment cell. In the past, men were thrown there naked in the dark. It was sometimes so crowded, they died from suffocation. Now, it's a small chapel, always open for the men to use at any time.
Bendita sois vós entre as mulheres, bendito é o fruto do vosso ventre.
The cells are only locked at night, and men find confidence in a full program. There are 10 to 12 in each cell. The occupants elect a president and a vice president, responsible for order, harmony and hygiene, and a prohibition on pornography, drugs and sexual activity. Over half the men hold title positions indicating responsibility. Handling this and establishing self-respect are high priorities in the first stage of their sentences. Everyone is responsible for his brother's welfare. One man from each cell is appointed to a prisoner's council. They call it the Council for Sincerity and Security. Here, all important matters and problems are referred. Ottoboni appoints a president. They discuss Ottoboni's proposals and the council's recommendations before Ottoboni ratifies them. There is a weekly meeting of the whole closed section of the prison with the prisoners' council, at which anyone may speak.
A diretoria executiva da APAC, constituída...
The directors and volunteers from the community could do nothing without the indispensable cooperation of the Prisoners' Council.
Do Conselho de Presos.
It is the council in all practical terms which administers the prison. They take charge of the pharmacy, they do the secretarial work, they choose who will handle security, organize the labor therapy and the dining room.
All the local authority provides is water, electricity and food, and the building which is carefully maintained by the men. For every 3 days of satisfactory work and good behavior, there's 1 day's remission of sentence. Good and bad conduct are recognized by a point system. On rare occasions, when it's suspected that drugs have been smuggled into a cell, the occupants are stripped naked in the courtyard and the council carries out an inspection. There are approximately 100 men in the closed section. A medal is presented every month to the recuperando voted by these men to have made the most valuable contribution to this section of the prison. APAC's policy is that men's families should live within 10 miles. Besides Sunday visiting, they can join in a midweek evening mass in the prison's semi-open section and can visit the men there every day. All denominations are welcome. Christian teaching and prayer are the backbone of the program, but nothing is compulsory. Elsa is a teacher and a key volunteer. She first came to APAC seeking Ottoboni's advice when her 19-year-old drug-addicted son had been missing for 14 days. He told her not to ask why, but to what purpose her troubles had come, and to pray for her son's return. He came back that day, and since then her spare time has been devoted to APAC. Psychologists, doctors, dentists, teachers all give their time. 70% of Brazil's prison population is at best semi-literate. Their experience of the volunteers' giving brings respect, openness, and a new attitude to authority.
When the conduct of a recuperando does not conform to what is normal here, he is called to the Council of Prisoners to explain the reason for his behavior. He is counselled at the first offence. On the second offence, he is called with the right to present a defence, and he is given a written warning. Normally, after the second time, he's invited to come to my room where he's counselled and asked to explain his actions and dealt with more rigorously. And he will be made aware that full compliance will be required of him from that point on. If the recuperando persists after the second warning, he is punished on a red point system of 1 to 30. If he's placed on this list for 3 separate or consecutive incidents, he runs the risk of transfer to another prison. He will be deemed unsuitable to benefit from the opportunities offered here because he's not assimilating or accepting what is normal in the house. It is very important to note that these cases occur less than once a year.
Ottoboni will see anyone with a written request once a week, and more if necessary.
I am father, counsellor, whatever is necessary. The important thing is to hear the man.
Severino has a 4-year sentence for rape. Recently, he offered to give one of his kidneys to a poor man with a big family. He says the loving friendships developing with the whole family and his knowledge that he has been able to help their father to live has given him a new and wonderful sense of emotional responsibility. One of this family has come to attend the Cursillo course, central to the men's development. It is now being held for the first time for their mothers, wives and girlfriends, slightly adapted to their particular circumstances. They have gathered rather apprehensively in the semi-open section to explore the course which has inspired a prison to give them a sympathetic welcome. In a high percentage of cases, the parental family is considered likely to be involved in the root cause of the man's behavior and can be the primary source of his healing. For weeks, recuperandos and volunteers have been preparing the prison for the 3-day visit of the families. Everything has been freshly painted. The men have vacated their dining room and are eating in the passages and cells, so that the dining room can be used by volunteers to prepare special food for the visitors. Many of these volunteers come from the families of ex-recuperandos. The volunteers have provided everything for the visitors, even their bus fares for 3 days.
Mas tá gostando? Tá entendendo?
No fundo,
it's an act of God which has programmed suffering.
o sofrimento
Either we find love by a direct experience, or we discover it through pain.
o encontramos através da dor.
That's what happened to the prodigal son. While the money lasted, his friends would pamper him with flattery. The prostitutes threw themselves at him. When the money ran out, everything vanished, and he was alone. Pain taught him there's another way, and his thoughts went back to his father. He realized that there he'd find the love that he needed. Each moment more people are dying from the lack of love than from the lack of food.
Ele veio para junto do Pai.
There is a weekly debate on moral values in the closed section of the prison, a direct development from Cursillo. Recuperandos and psychologists agree that they're vital. The week before the women's visit, the subject was the family.
When a son is born, the mother dreams up the best for him, plans for him to become a doctor, a lawyer, or the president. And then when something goes wrong, the establishment blames the upbringing, the family.
You're thinking of your own family?
No, not only my family.
Various other families?
Yes.
No, I don't believe this anymore.
Doña Elsa, I know various examples in San Jose, well-to-do families, and I have people in my own family, big influences in local society, famous doctors and lawyers, yet my cousin is an addict. Now, Doña Elsa, where have my cousins gone wrong? Where has this family failed?
Maybe they were too soft. Maybe they gave too much.
What would happen if they gave less?
Would that make them better? This is for each member of the family.
Let's talk about upbringing. Me, for example. My mother and father brought up their family. I was the oldest son. I was already 25 when I became a delinquent. What an interesting experience. My father always worked hard. My mother looked after the younger children. They built up a very good standard of living. My father's dead now, but he worked until he was 79. And my parents were happily married for 50 years. I started in crime at 25. I'm the black sheep. No one in my family has ever been near a police station for a criminal offence. I don't ever even consider blaming the family.
You can't even think of it. When a man's 25 and commits a crime, it's completely different from when he's 12.
I had the whole world in my hands. I could have grabbed the opportunities, but I didn't.
I was the only girl in a family of 13. Imagine if we didn't have that balance and belief in God. Imagine if my brothers had believed that to have a better life, they should have chosen crime.
The debates get them talking about why they did it, and much of the character building grows from the small groups which follow them.
My family's always been very good to me. I'm the one that skidded out.
Because you didn't listen?
I just decided to opt for the other side.
You didn't listen?
Yes, I went my own way. Now I see it's wrong.
The hardest thing is when you lie to yourself. Does your father give you a good example?
No, my father only beat me and went to the pub.
Did he ever bring any money to the house?
Nothing. He spent it at the pub and left debts at the bar.
Did that make you angry?
Yeah.
So you went out to get away?
Yes.
If you go to the street, who adopts you?
Layabouts.
The family's a seed bed. If a seedling is well tended and disease attacks, the plant will recover much more easily. But if, for example, the father's dropped out or the mother drops out, then it's going to be much harder for him to recover. In that case, he's going to need to be adopted by someone who can not substitute. No one can take the place of a father or a mother.
Love is not a luxury in the life of human beings. It's the most vital need in our lives. I've been dealing with the human heart for the last 50 years. Crime is an irrational act. The decision to be evil is a horrible option for the criminal. It's also a rebellion, often against the frustration suffered through lack of affection in childhood. A desperate cry, like a child who will misbehave to get the attention of parents when he feels doomed to neglect. Love is an act of courage. It prepares a child to face the challenges of life and enables him to embrace responsibility. So often parents try to protect their children and they let them have an easy time, but the children must learn responsibility very early in life. They need to participate, to contribute to the life of the family. Even when they're very little, they get so happy because they love to help. A little boy, too, was sweeping the floor with his mother. I asked him, "Are you helping your mother?" And he said, "No, she's helping me." These very little things can change their orientation.
Is there a proper period in life when this should happen? Or can you cure it at any time?
Any time.
In the group discussions which follow the talks on ideals, study, action, the environment, the women begin to discover an increasing empathy. There's time for reflection on biblically based meditations. They find support and acceptance from the volunteers and relax and enjoy growing friendships. They know too that their men have been through this same experience.
During the Consilio, we volunteers received letters of encouragement from recuperandos. One touched me very deeply. He wrote, "The most fantastic thing in life is to be able to get hold of little things which are good and transform them into major achievements. The most fantastic thing for me is realizing we've got through to them, that their lives can change completely and that they can return to society as normal human beings."
Sarah first came to APAC to visit her nephew who was convicted on drug charges. The gentleness and concern of the women who undertake the body searches astonished her, but most of them had been through it themselves. The parcels which visitors bring to the prison on Sundays are inspected by volunteers with the help of some of the men. APAC's 75 volunteers have been selected after training. The most mature become padrinos, or godparents. Every recuperando is given a godparent when he comes to the prison, an experienced volunteer who stands by him throughout his sentence, always listening to what he wants to say, and befriending his family to build new bridges of understanding between them. They say that when he comes out, he will be able to give love. Sometimes, to begin with, it's too painful. Mr. Chavez and his wife have worked for APAC since it began. They have seen hundreds of men transformed in this place, which the men say is more like a family than a prison. He, or another of the 4 most experienced men volunteers, will have overall responsibility throughout the night. When the occupants have been counted, the cells are locked. Edson arrived at APAC 7 months ago, handcuffed with 6 armed guards. As night watchman, he will be solely responsible for the 100 men in the maximum security cells throughout the night. Mr. Chavez is based in an office near the main gate in the semi-open section. Edson cannot remember ever having had a family. When he was born, his mother left him with a friend who worked in a brothel. 15 years ago, using Air Force equipment, he robbed a bank with 3 other men. It was 18 months before they were caught. One was shot dead, another made paraplegic. Edson got 78 years. For 13 years, he was in Sao Paulo's huge and grossly overcrowded prison and considered a high security risk. His one aim was to tear the place apart. In the punishment block, he was hung upside down and beaten with iron bars everywhere except on his face. Edson survived the Sao Paulo prison massacre in 1992. A row between 2 rival gangs over a parcel of cocaine became a riot which escalated to all parts of the prison. "200 men were gunned down or torn apart by police dogs. For 3 days afterwards, Edson was made to recover the bodies, naked, in 18 inches of blood, water, and broken glass. When he got to APAC, he was convinced everybody hated him. He attacked his cleaning jobs with ferocious commitment and kept himself apart. He still can't sit with his back to a door. Recently, he was astonished to be given the medal for the recuperando voted to have contributed most to the clothed section of the prison in a month. He wept for the first time he can remember. He spends much of the night in the old punishment cell, praying for himself and for the other men. Over the cross is written, "Estamos juntos." we are together. And on the door behind him, do not be afraid. You are mine. I have called you by name. The senior men in the Prisoners' Council will have recommended him for the jobs he needs to give him the space and the responsibility.
The greatest victory for me is to have got out with my life and to realize that inside there are many people who have no hope of getting out alive. When you're out, you become aware of how worthwhile it was to struggle to stay alive. In prison, death is normal, a daily occurrence. But this is covered up, contained within the prison. It's very difficult not to see the sinister circumstances surrounding these deaths. Accidents and provoked suicides for reasons of, well, you know, I mean, it's a suicide. I learned inside with my friends, some still there, the need to stay alive.
The men in the closed section will see a psychologist in a small group once a week. They will find something, however small, that a recuperando feels good about, and expand from that.
Não está falando mentiras, ninguém está falando a verdade. Isso aí é uma coisa que acontece, eu acho, na vida de qualquer um.
Ficou 3 anos e 8 meses. Nessa linha de terapia, a visão religiosa é...
In this kind of therapy, the religious vision is essential. The great problem in this century, up until now, has been its existential secularism. And this is very important to give a person a sense of who he is, from a secular point of view. This is not sectarian, but a natural thing. The problems stem from a lack of sense of purpose in life, direction, cause, reason. A sense of religion is essential to find the reason for life's meaning.
Simone is Edson's girlfriend. She was in love with him before he went to prison and always visited him. 3 years ago, she had a baby. Edson is devoted to the little girl, who is accepted by everyone in APAC as his child. Soon they will be married in the prison, and when Edson graduates to the semi-open section, the APAC family will help them to establish their home. As they mature and discover the fulfillment of reciprocal responsibility, recuperandos with no families will be encouraged to build relationships of their own. The men make things for their families or for sale. The skills are handed on to each generation of recuperando. As president of the Prisoners' Council in the semi-open section, Messias is the most senior recuperando in the prison. His talk for the Conselho concerns our responsibility to our surroundings, our position in the creation. Messias had 114 years to serve, now commuted to 30. After 7 years in the closed section, with support from the psychologists and judge in charge of his case, he's free to work for APAC outside the prison during the day. He is in overall charge of security for the whole prison. He says the happiness of being trusted and able to trust himself is almost unbelievable. He says he found the key to it through Cursillo. From a barren childhood, he married at 18 to make himself a home. When he found his wife in bed with another man, he shot him. His first sentence was for armed robbery. 3.5 years in prison improved his skills. On release, internal emptiness increased his appetite for violence. He became a gang leader. He made 45 assaults with arms. A number of people were killed. Police shot him twice in his chest and twice in his head, and a bullet in his spine paralyzed him. He was immobile for 6 months, and when he could move again, the violence increased. Then he was kept in a cell 1 meter by 1 meter. He says he believes he only survived because God had work for him to do. Soon, he will be one of the group of men with total charge of the prison throughout the night. When they have graduated to the 3rd stage, men live at home with their families but must sign in punctually every evening at 7 p.m. They have a meeting once a fortnight with Ottoboni. They're encouraged to be involved in service to the community. And APAC has been an excellent preparation. In the 2nd stage of their sentences, the men have greatly increased freedom and responsibility. There is little contact with the closed section. The open dormitory has 50 beds. There are showers, a dining room, and an open-air chapel. This section is entirely maintained by the men. They're now expected to help with their families' problems and to contribute financially to their families and to APAC. When they're considered able to manage the responsibility of a job, they'll be given a letter of recommendation to a known employer and may be outside the prison from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. The men will be vulnerable to the temptation of life on the street. Though alcohol, pornography and drugs are available in state prisons, there is none in APAC. No. They will be supported in handling the transition by their godparents and the prisoners' council. The volunteers are in touch with many of their previous contacts. They say it's difficult, but it has to be done. Until they're ready to handle a full day outside the prison, they will run errands, work in the office, and keep the main gates. Outside the prison, they will wear black baseball caps at this stage of their sentence. Messias collects small monthly contributions from APAC's many supporters. Only the food, water and electricity is funded by the government, and these donations cover the small day-to-day expenses. Messias visits his new wife and their little daughter every day. The basic concept of a semi-open section has now been adopted in many Brazilian prisons. Bad behavior or unjustifiable absence means a return to the closed section. The length of a man's return will be decided by the judge in charge of his case. It could be anything from 70 hours to 3 months. Paulino was a recuperando. He began a law degree in the semi-open section. Now qualified and his sentence completed, he is responsible for handling all legal matters under Ottoboni. He is the only salaried member of APAC, paid by the city council, which also gives Ottoboni a pension. The men in the closed section say it would be very easy to escape. But they have a high investment in the system and so will not seek to destroy it. If a man in the semi-open section stays out beyond his time, he's generally back within days. If after 2 weeks he hasn't returned, other men will go out and look for him. With the godparents' understanding of his family and the recuperando's knowledge of the criminal community, their searches are remarkably successful. He's then faced with the choice of returning to APAC or being handed over to the police. Throughout the Cusillo, the men have arranged a prayer vigil. Nobody in the prison knows that one of the volunteers was a very senior member of the customs police. She has now taken a more simple job to allow time to work for APAC. Ottoboni says most legal systems around the world respond to the effects and not to the causes of crime. But the judicial system which condemns a man must follow him into his prison cell. The quality of relationships which bind society together is the most valuable thing that we have. After 3 days together, the women share a close bond, and the prison holds no threat.
Order and faith are inherent in human life. It is very difficult to take at face value a person who doesn't have faith in God and respect for a superior being. They construct their own world and a private God. They can believe anything. When you cross the road in front of the green traffic light, why do you believe it is safe to go across? Because you believe in the traffic lights. Who made the traffic lights?
It was a man.
Which one?
We don't know. It was a man.
But you believe.
Their experience together has brought them to realize the inestimable value of trust.
I want you just to believe this which is in my hand. Do you see it? Does anyone here know anyone in the San Antonio Old People's Home?
Yes, I know someone.
Okay, all the old people there, every one of them, are praying for all of you. Although they don't know you, they write to say how much they care for you. How does that happen? Many people have written to say that they will be praying for you during these 3 days.
At the end of their journey, they have come to a place of openness and peace.
Para que, Senhor Jesus, eu consiga transmitir, Senhor, dentro da minha própria casa, Senhor. Eu consiga, Senhor, amar meu filho, a minha nora, minha neta, no meu serviço, no meu trabalho, Senhor. Que eu consiga amar todos os companheiros aqui da APAC, Senhor, realmente, Senhor.
Eu agradeço, Senhor, eu te honro. Todas as coisas belas que têm acontecido em minha vida, por ter me mostrado um caminho de luz, de amor.
Ottoboni says, if man is created for infinity, he is capable of infinite recuperation. The candles stand upright in bags of salt. There is a smaller candle in every table setting with a message encouraging them to be salt and light to the world. The salt purifies, preserves, and heals. The isolation and fear of the second sentence, suffered by the prisoners' families, is past. After their 3-day journey through Cursillo, the families are united. For APAC, love is justice, and justice is love.